What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Today, special treat. We are going live from Industry City in Brooklyn, New York. Before I bring my guest on, the message of the week. You get a kick out of this. If they build it. No, fuck, I fucked it up.
Nice one.
It's his fault. If you build it, they will come.
Yes.
Fuck. It's been a while since I watched Field of Dreams. I got confident. I was happy. We're in Fort Hamilton Distillery in Industry City in Brooklyn. He's given me 3 drinks already. It's going to be, as Dave Chappelle said, it's only going to get worse from here.
Exactly.
Welcoming back to the show, Alex Clark. He is the proprietor of this fabulous new distillery and tasting room in Industry City. If you don't know anything about Industry City, look it up. It's this crazy complex along Brooklyn's waterfront. And Alex here has infiltrated it. The long story, we'll get to that. We have some time to unpack that. But this is the second time on the show. We had him on for a segment when everything first shut down, talking about B2B operations, because as a producer, he supplies many local restaurants and bars and liquor stores. I can think of a few.
Yeah.
There's this one on Prospect Ave called Juice Box Wines and Spirits. It's a good spot. A restaurant called Della, where his booze is featured in a number of cocktails. Good. Those are the only couple I can think of off the top of my head.
Those are the ones we need to talk about today. 2 of the best. Yeah.
Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeremiah.
Man. So again, we're live in his new tasting room. Check out his social media if you want to really see like a lot of the cool stuff that he's been doing here. It's a beautiful, beautiful space. It's really awesome. And it's so fun to do shows live again in person as opposed to sitting remotely like we did last time. It kind of sucks. So things are getting back to normal here. So, you know, I mentioned in the social media promo for this, like I've kind of watched this go from like just discussion, this brand from like infancy to like, it was the little sperm still when we first met it.
Sure.
And
you want to describe my
journey
like that? That's fine.
It is now swam all the way through, and you have some really great products here, some single and double barrel bourbons and ryes, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We won't reveal that's not just yet.
Top secret.
You know, it's funny because you hear a lot of people these days talk about, I want to start a business, I want to do this, I want to do that, and like you and I we've actually done it. We've actually like sat and pondered and drank and like cried and come up with these lame brain, far-fetched ideas and like actually put them into effect, which is a feat in and of itself.
It is, and I think that your tolerance for risk, you kind of got to negate at some point, right? Because that's the thing. If you're worried about
where the alcohol comes in.
Yeah, exactly.
No coincidence. We both have alcohol-related businesses.
If you were worried about the consequences of doing such a thing, then you would never do it, right? Like, because there are, many ways it could all go wrong, horribly wrong.
And we'll talk about some of those
ways.
Oh,
sure we will.
As this
We've
goes
both
on.
got scars to prove it, I think, right?
So like initially what was like, because, I've talked a lot about my own journey, but like for you, what were you thinking?
Well, I wasn't. And I think that's the thing, right? If you think about it too much, you'll never do it. So it's a question of not thinking and actually just getting up there and giving it a go. But I think you have to understand that the nature of the business too. So I did learn a lot from working at Widow Jane and launching that brand, and realize that, hey, the biggest part of what I do really is in many ways is sales, right? So there is no whiskey brand unless you're selling whiskey. Mm-hmm. Like you can make a beautiful brand, but if it's not moving, then you don't have a business. So, focusing on that, I knew that we knew our way around that world. And we had developed relationships with people such as yourself, Juice Box, Della, other great liquor stores around town.
You only have to say it 3 more times and you get paid.
So, we
got 45 more minutes.
We had these relationships in place already to an extent, but we didn't have a brand to present to them. So it was like, okay, well, what do we want to do? And rye whiskey was my focus because it's the original whiskey of America. It's the original whiskey of New York. And we wanted to bring it back and put it up on its pedestal as the king of the American whiskeys, which is what it was until Prohibition killed all the distilleries in the northeast of America, and all distillation started focusing down in Kentucky, where they're making corn whiskey, corn being heavily subsidized by the government. Very difficult to bring rye whiskey back to life after that point, because basically whiskey doesn't cost anything to make when it's the raw material is so subsidized. So, but we're too stupid to make corn whiskey. So, Bourbon's the biggest whiskey in America, obviously.
When you say we're trying to bring it back, do you mean like the British? Or
yes.
I'm just pointing out the obvious.
Well, and it's funny because you said that I had infiltrated Industry City earlier, which I thought was an interesting adjective to use.
I told you, it's only going to get worse.
There's obviously Fort Hamilton is a brand that's based on the history of Brooklyn and the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Brooklyn, which technically the British won. So, but what we're really trying to do is establish the point that New York whiskey is the oldest whiskey in America, and it goes all the way back to Revolutionary War times. And yes, I am English, so there is an irony there, which isn't lost on many people.
Watch him. There's a cannon on his label.
Yeah, no.
Be ready. Don't be surprised when it happens.
Technically, that cannon represents the cannon that was stolen by Alexander Hamilton's Hearts of Oak militia from the British, and then turned around and used against them. So, that's front and center.
And now he's flipping it, and he's
just, I'm coming back through the back door.
He's softening us
taking it back
with rye and bourbon, and he's just going to get us completely sauced. And
something like that.
Take it all back.
Steal it all in the middle of the night.
Not for nothing. We're not far from the base. Just pointing out.
We're not.
We've had waterway right here.
We've had the garrison commander of the Fort Hamilton Army base through several times.
That's awesome.
He's a friend. And we get a few people up from the base doing tours and tastings and having a good time. And we actually were on the base a couple of weeks ago doing a cigar and whiskey night.
Nice.
Hispanic heritage night.
Was Brian Bodnar anywhere nearby?
He was not. No. That guy's still upstate though, isn't he?
I know. But he'll surface for things like that.
Yeah?
He's into it.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. He was a Nat Sherman, right?
Yeah. Cigars for years. So you made an interesting point about how you had the sales portion down, you had the channels of distribution kind of unlocked out, but no product yet. Mm-hmm. Most people start the other way. So you kind of deconstructed the process. Most people are like, hey, I make really good cookies. I want to open a bakery. And they don't know shit about running a bakery.
Sure.
You know how to make cookies, but
that's true. But the other thing is that cookies, you make them one day, you sell them the next. Whereas whiskey, you make it 1 year and you sell it 4 years later. Mm-hmm. So it's even trickier in a way to get something to market. Yeah. And it's a time-consuming process. But I think the biggest mistake that people make is not focus on branding first, and not focus on how it's going to get out in the market. Because, I think people paint themselves into a corner. Like if you make a package and you're like, this is it, this is where it's at. But then you start thinking about, well, what is the market? Where is this going? How is it going? How are we growing this? It's too late. Your package is already there. Your message is already out there. And you might have missed the point potentially.
So where did this, focus on branding start for you? I mean, I remember drinking in your basement.
That was it. That was the day.
trying samples, and we talked a lot about branding back then. And which is funny because in hindsight, I'm like, I didn't know shit about branding, but we talked about it a lot.
Yeah, we did. And actually, in the backyard of my house is where the plan was hatched, and many a silly whiskey name was banded around over a beer and some barbecue.
I participated in a couple of those.
Yeah, you were there. And there was a long list of names, most of which completely sucked in hindsight. And the problem is that actually all names suck until you do it, right?
Until they start making money.
Yeah, until they start making it. Oh, this actually isn't so
like
stupid.
This name now.
Yeah, this name's okay. But certainly when you're naming a whiskey brand, you've got to think about, what else is out there? How do you get your story across in 2 or 3 words, right? Like, so the Widow Jane story was, Widow Jane mine, water from upstate New York, boom, easy peasy. Fort Hamilton, Revolutionary New York, rye whiskey, And
we should point out too, it's also the name of the train station
where
we all live, where these
That's where it came from, though.
Horrible plans were hatched.
I would, go bartend to make ends meet whilst waiting for my whiskey to get tasty. And on my way home on the subway at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, I would scribble down whiskey names furiously and get off at Fort Hamilton Parkway with a list of terrible names.
And this whole time,
it's right in my face. Yeah. And I was like, what is Fort Hamilton? What is this cool name all about? And, it turns out that's where the Battle of Brooklyn started.
I mean, as a Brit, you should know that. Didn't they teach this in history class when you were a
kid?
You
know what? We don't talk much about the Revolutionary War in America, believe it or not. World War I, World War II, absolutely, all day long. We don't really... We kind of gloss over the late 1700s.
Nothing to see here.
Yeah. Certainly from a British point of view, we feel like it was a close shave and we got out just in the nick of time. That's generally how it's perceived over there.
You're just mad because you lost the cannon.
Of course.
Anyways, back to our serious conversation.
Yeah, deadly serious.
So, one of my mentors and one of my first bosses, he's built a sizable restaurant empire, and he talks about the name a lot. Like, your name should be very indicative of what you are. Like, you have to be careful with some of these names, like Della. I don't mean shit unless it doesn't tell a story. Like that
right.
You can fall into this trap. Now, fortunately, we focus on like being intimate with people, so we have the opportunity to tell a story.
Sure.
That's, if you're going to do that, that's okay. But I think you made a very good point that just in like 2 or 3 words, you need to be able to tell people what the hell you're really about. It needs to come across quickly, and then possibly like a tagline somewhere in there too. That's also like 2 to 3 words,
yes.
where people get it. Like in that instance, it's like, okay, I know what I'm dealing with here. A lot of the mystery has been removed because there's tons of friction. I mean, there's competition. There's like so many things. CTV, we'll talk about them shortly too.
Please don't.
Yeah, please don't. Don't worry. They're not listening. Nobody's listening. But I think that is really important that you just make life a little bit easier for yourself when you focus that way. So a number of things you pointed out already that are just huge. If there actually is anybody listening and you are, an entrepreneur or a business owner, you want to be like, think about your channels of distribution. What does sales look like? If, I say it all the time, if a tree falls in an empty forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make sound? Like, I know that's deep for you. Just
wow.
We're about to take a break.
More whiskey.
Anyways, it's just like if nobody's there to hear you, hear your noise, or you can't reach them. What do you have? You've got a shiny little box.
Right.
You got a pretty little package, and that's kind of it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of angles that you kind of have to attack from the get-go.
Right.
And I think that the naming is key.
It's
certainly for a whiskey brand where people are going to be talking about it in a bar or a restaurant setting, and you want people to be able to share that story quickly and efficiently. But not for nothing, you also need to make sure that it's a name that is trademarkable. And that's something that we had a run-in with earlier on in our inception. The original name for the business was a Brooklyn formative name, and geographical locations are hard to trademark.
Yeah.
And so people tried to chase us off of that mark, and ultimately we were in the right, they were in the wrong, and we ended up getting money paid to us to help launch the business.
It wasn't the U.S. Army by chance.
It wasn't.
No,
I mean, the trademark law is an interesting one. It's basically about the channels of distribution that your product trades in.
Right. So
unless the U.S. Army suddenly starts to make booze, Fort Hamilton is not going to be trademarkable for them. We had a run in there. I know a friend of mine who started up a company doing men's cosmetic stuff. He launched and then got in a trademark dispute, and all the hard work he'd done disappeared because he had to stop selling under that name. And the name that you have is the value of your company. Really, it's all about intellectual property. So yes, you've got to do sales, but ultimately down the road, how is your company valued? And your company is valued according to brand recognition, name recognition. And if you don't have your IP locked up and your trademarks tight, then you're in trouble. So
take that one to the bank, kids.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a minute. Sip some whiskey. Hang tight, everybody. All right, we're live. He's yelling at his secretary. Live from
co-founder
Fort Hamilton Distillery. in Industry City in Brooklyn, New York, right on the waterfront, not far from the actual Fort Hamilton base. Alex here has got plans. Joining me today, again, Alex Clark. Should I call you a partner then in Fort Hamilton?
Co-founder.
Co-founder.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I a co-founder too? Because I spent all those times.
You drank a lot of whiskey in my backyard. In that case,
is that all?
There's a lot of co-founders
yeah,
out
exactly.
there. Millions, probably.
That's awesome. So yeah, we're here in his gorgeous new facility in Industry City. How long have you been here for?
We signed a lease here probably 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Is that right? Yeah, that's right.
Just got to ask his secretary.
Yeah, 2.5 years. No, it's absolutely right, which seems incredible because,
you've only been open 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've only been open a few weeks because, there was a pandemic, apparently.
Yeah. So
rumor has it.
We talked about some pitfalls to watch out for in the first segment about branding, particularly trademarking. But yeah, they're bigger fish in the sea that could scoop you up. So you signed 2.5 years ago. When was your slated opening?
Last March.
Yeah. March of 2020?
March 2020.
Did something happen?
Something happened.
Do tell.
Well, apparently the pandemic happened, and not only did we not get to open our
Apparently,
distillery,
are you one of those naysayers? You're like,
no.
Didn't happen.
No, it
There's
happened.
No virus.
It happened. So we had built the tasting room with a view to getting it open last summer 2020, or spring, summer 2020. And I was going to leave my bartending job in the city, which had helped, pad our income whilst building a supply chain of whiskey.
Another really good point, right? Is a lot of people are like, I'm going to quit my job and open my own business.
Yeah. Depends on the business, I suppose. But I don't think quitting your job is generally the right move for 99% of people. It certainly wasn't the right move for me, but I'm in a business where inventory is extraordinarily expensive and time consuming to make. So for the last 5 years after leaving the other distillery, it was like, let's focus on building a supply chain of whiskey, growing our relationships with local retailers such as yourself in a sustainable and steady manner, not just blow it out and open as many accounts as we could.
Right.
Could have done that in year one, could have opened a ton of accounts, and then you have to back it up with more whiskey.
I was going to say 3 months in, you're going to have no booze.
Yeah, you have no booze.
You have no sales.
Yeah, no sales. You don't, you might have a bit of extra income because of the extra sales that you've made, but you're not putting quality product out on the market. And we have been extraordinarily focused on releasing quality products. And I think that's something that sets us apart from some of the other guys out there that are just looking to get as quick a return on their investment as possible.
So those are very good points. Quality is super important, but the word you use for sustainable sales, not just one and done, we had a great March,
right,
and now we're out for 3 months or maybe longer,
right,
because the supply chain is all fucked up now,
right. And not for nothing,
having something consistently out there.
Yeah, and getting that consistency going is actually tricky, especially when we've been building this brand without having a home base necessarily. We've been using other people's spaces, which is another way to keep our overheads low, which is great, especially when you're spending so much money on inventory. And we had to do it that way. But it's also tricky because now you're in a highly regulated industry. You're swimming around.
We get to talk about the TTB.
Other people's. Yes, I knew this was going to happen. You made it happen. Your dreams
I'm a spy for them. They brought me in.
I got nothing to hide, buddy. We are
guts.
totally legit.
Yeah.
And especially since last March we were supposed to move in. All construction got shut down in Brooklyn. So we weren't able to get our licenses over the line until August. And so it was almost 6 months delay in that. And of course, no one was rushing around oh, please get your tasting room open as quickly as possible, because everyone was just locked down and fearing for their lives.
Run a hose out to the street and
exactly.
shoot shots down.
That's the way to do it.
Good God.
We had thought about, I was like, well, how are we going to do this? We're on the hook for rent. We can't open the tasting room to the general public. What are we going to do? I considered releasing a ready-to-drink cocktail because that's something that we could technically sell from the tasting room to go. The law had been relaxed at the time to allow that for craft distilleries to do that. Since then, it's been tightened back up again. So in a way, I'm glad we didn't go down that road. It would have taken a lot of resources away from potentially our core mission of making Fort Hamilton whiskeys, you know, great.
It would have been nice if they just left that one alone, though.
Oh yeah, sure.
You know,
yeah. Being able to ship to
but I mean,
customers.
Who are we hurting, really, with that?
I don't know. That's another episode right there.
Another philosophical question.
That's a long episode. So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately that's the other thing too. Is like when you're in a business, you got to look at, you know, the ground shifts, and you've got to be ready to move on it too. So yeah, looking at other pathways to market, such as internet sales, which we've focused on quite heavily. So if you go to the website now, you'll find that we can ship you products anywhere in America, which is a new thing for us. Then of course, because of that functionality, we now have the ability to drop a marketing campaign out there, which can say, click this button to buy Fort Hamilton whiskey. Well, then all of a sudden that all makes sense, right? There's a reason that we've done it that way. But again, these didn't happen overnight. These are relationships we've had to build with other retailers and understand the pathways to market.
And some were by force. Like you wouldn't have gone down that. Would you have taken that path otherwise?
Not as quickly as I did. Absolutely not. I mean, I think eventually any business is going to maximize its potential by getting all the avenues to market open. But to do it as quickly as we have, it's probably a bit unique. And we also sort of looked at other states as well. We opened up Kentucky last year, in California, which are actually going really well for us. But the problem is we only just got to visit Kentucky, which is, you know, you've got to kind of have boots on the ground in these states too. So we took a sort of different view on it, and instead of just being really reactive to COVID and just coming out with like an RTD cocktail format and getting that to market as quickly as possible, because people weren't allowed to go to bars and restaurants. So it would make sense that you could provide them that in a liquor store environment. But a lot of other people were doing the same thing too. But then all of a sudden you're just one of a number of people in that crowded marketplace. And actually what I did do was decide, actually, here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually bring our bourbon out. So we'll get to that in a bit. But ultimately that was my core mission last year, was get the bourbon out there.
And you were still doing wholesale. You were still selling.
Yes. But
especially locally
and
liquor stores were cleaning up.
But all, you know, being in food and beverage for a long time in the city, like working in bars and restaurants, I have great connections in that realm. And that was one of our sort of superpowers, was actually having some great accounts, you know. So Blue Hill at Stone Barns is with a house pour up there. We're in Jean Georges, we're at Balthazar, we're at Bavo, we're at Maria, we're at, you know, some great accounts in the city.
Special.
I can't afford to eat any of them, of course. But you are special. You are special. You get the special stuff. I show up with special bottles for you. You know that. Shirts and hoodies soon. Check out the website. Yes. So yeah, I mean the mix of liquor store sales to bar and restaurant sales, which was, you know, around 65-35, suddenly went to like 95-5. And it's not like we did start selling more in liquor stores, but it's not like we could add the same amount of liquor stores that we lost through restaurant
there's just not that
attrition.
Many, first of all.
There's not that many. But what we did do, and I think this is important, is prior to the pandemic happening, we brought out the double barrel rye, which is targeted for, you know, as a sort of small batch entry level offering, which isn't super expensive, but it's still premium, but because the quality's there, and it's targeted, you know, on the shelf, kind of right around where Bullet is, and having then two different price points available really worked for us. Like that saved our bacon during the pandemic, because people were at home going, hey, I want a decent cocktail, but, you know, we can't get it from a restaurant, but I certainly know how to Google how do you make a Manhattan, and then go to the store and buy the ingredients. Gravitated towards that because it was like, you know, good enough that it's going to make a really great cocktail,
But it's not $100 Manhattan.
It's not $100 Manhattan, right? So,
which I love, but it's hard to do every day.
Right. So I think that having that different price points then baked into our strategy really paid off.
Very nice. Yeah.
So instead of just like riding in one lane with one kind of price point, which is you're only able to attract a certain kind of customer. That
on either end of the spectrum,
you're missing.
Right?
Yeah, either way.
Like all you're doing is
if it's a $20 bottle of whiskey, you're getting people that like $20 bottles of whiskey. If it's a $60 bottle of whiskey, you're getting that lot. But there's and there's occasionally there's movement between the two. But you're actually almost in different sectors of the market and
it's hard to market for both simultaneously. It's
yes.
almost like a whole nother budget.
Yeah, but I think that's why doing what we do with the range that we have, where it's all under the same umbrella, is sensible. And not for nothing, we back in the day when I was like, well, we want to come out with this other style of whiskey that's really accessible and is able to be used in cocktails, but still drinks wonderfully by itself. Should that be under a different brand name? And we did an exploration of that, and ultimately decided that actually no, it's going to be high quality juice. It should run under the Fort Hamilton banner. It's just going to be a little bit lower priced. And the truth is, if we had have gone under a different brand name, we would have doubled our marketing costs.
Exactly.
And we would have diluted our focus from the market or into the market, and that would have been a bad idea.
Agreed.
Lord knows I looked at it for a while. I looked at a lot of bad ideas.
That's how we learn.
Yeah, right.
That's how we learn.
I didn't jump on it, but
I've been there for a few of those bad ideas. All right, we're gonna take another break, everybody. Hang tight, grab a drink. We'll be back in just a few. Next, we'll go into Fort Hamilton Distillery, where we are zooming in live today, Industry City, Brooklyn, with the owner here, Alex Clark. And where are we going now? Well, so I asked you at the beginning of the show. That was my first intro. I didn't mess up today, too. Pat myself on the back. Nice. Hey, 3 out of 4 ain't bad, right? I asked you at the beginning, like you were, you're putting this idea together for selling this whiskey. Like, why would you do that? And now I'm asking you again, why take over? Like, what's your square footage here? This is fucking massive.
It's relatively, I think it's like 1750 for the net square feet. Not net square, the rent. Yeah, net square feet. Rentable square feet's a bit higher, right? Because we have common areas. There's a big corridor out there. So we pay proportion of that. Yeah. There's a space down the hallway that we're considering leasing as well for extra barrel storage.
Gotcha.
And the entryway here, there's supposedly going to be tables and chairs there. So overspill from the bar can go into the hallway, and there's places.
So like 2,000 plus square feet.
Yeah, if you include hallways and stuff, then absolutely. Yeah, but it's more like 22, 23.
Right. These super duper high ceilings and everything.
Big high ceilings of old industrial building. Ceilings are like 12 and a half feet tall. And the floor is made from like 18 inches of concrete, which we know because we had to dig a floor trench drain. And that was an interesting afternoon.
Some of the fun of brick and mortar.
Yes.
Let's bust up an 18-inch deep concrete floor.
Right. But they are built to last, and the architecture here is actually kind of really cool and stunning. We actually took that window, was one of the exterior windows that they've been replacing with double glazed windows to increase their energy efficiency. But we took one of their old windows that have been in there since the early 1900s and sandblasted it and put that in there. So we're kind of maintaining the integrity architecturally of Industry City, but being able to have a nice view of what's happening in the distillery at the same time. So the idea is if you come to the bar, you'll get to be a part of the distilling experience.
Now we're getting to the answer. Like, why would you take this space on? You've got a working brand, you're distributing, you're wholesaling, and like this is a big expense.
It's a massive expense, especially one that we haven't really been able to unlock the potential of for the last couple of years, which has been interesting. The truth is that we looked at when the pandemic happened or started and everything shut down. I lost my job at Maria. It became clear that we weren't going to be opening this tasting room anytime soon. It kind of focuses the mind a little bit. So I looked at raising capital for the first time, which we did successfully a few months ago. Nice. It took me a while to, build the deck. Actually, it took me about a month to build the deck. Very late nights, as Amy will attest. I would just stay up there and and start cranking away on Google Slides and taught myself that, and got into the business model more on Excel and taught myself that more.
Oh, fun.
And yeah, good times. But ultimately, that's the best thing about the pandemic, is there wasn't really anything else to do. So I was like, okay, let's really flesh this out. Let's figure out where we are and where we're going with this. It was all there. All the building blocks were there. It was just a question of how to get this on paper, how to express it accurately, and learning how to do a deck properly was actually a really good and beneficial part of this whole pandemic situation. So part of that exploration involved looking at people's income from their tasting rooms. So it turns out, if you look at the American Craft Distilling Association website alongside Discuss, which is the Distilled Spirits Council, and various other publications out there, piecing all that information together, it became clear that tasting rooms were actually a very large income generating portion of most craft distillers' business.
Nice.
In actual fact, over 50% of their income comes from tasting rooms, is what they're reporting, which is massive. Now, we sort of, the way that we're built, like with this more national sort of identity, as opposed to just a mom and pop distillery, like Fort Hamilton is built with an American story, not just a Brooklyn story. Yes, we're in Brooklyn and we're proud of that. We're also proud of being the original American whiskey. And so we think that we're ultimately going to, we already are actually making more money, out there than we do from the tasting room. But once we get this up and running completely, it's going to generate some significant income for us. Because we're in Brooklyn, obviously the rent is higher, but then the potential return on the investment is also higher because we have, a few million people on our doorstep.
And you're in this like distillery conglomerate here where you got Barrow's ginger liqueur, you've got Wormwood is close by, right?
Yeah, they're right there. Standard Wormwood. You've got the Brooklyn Kura Sake is downstairs. Right. You've got Big Alice Brewing as well. So you could come to this courtyard and just have a really good time. Yes, get tanked. That's it. But I think what we're bringing to the party is a slightly different sensibility of, I come from, a cocktail background with the Milk and Honey guys and Eastside Company. And so we want to, and, years at Balthazar, years at Murray, I'm very much in tune with that classic cocktail style. That's one of the reasons that we focus on rye whiskey, is because it's the base for all the great classics. So you'll find a more kind of an elevated cocktail experience, I would say, in a bar, in a tasting room of a distillery, which isn't necessarily what you always find. I think oftentimes it's like people that come from Wall Street saying, oh, I feel like I'm done with Wall Street. I've got lots of money. Let me go open a distillery. We're coming from, we've been bartending for years and in the food and beverage scene for years, don't have a lot of money, but we know how to do it right. So we're kind of approaching it from a slightly different angle. And I think that gives us an advantage. And so you'll see that once we start making cocktails.
Today,
yeah. We're doing cocktails right now. We have a barrel-aged old fashioned that we do on the weekends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I see where you're going.
Yeah, it's the next break.
Can you stock like a full bar here?
We can stock, we have a commercial A1 distilling license, and we have a New York Farm D license. So the farm license gives us the privilege to operate a tasting room adjacent to the distillery, so long as the products that we stock on the bar are made from at least 75% New York agricultural product. And so because we make New York rye, New York bourbon, New York maple syrup, we're good to go. Yeah.
But I mean, can you bring like other cordials in? Like, can you?
So we're somewhat limited in that scope.
Right.
So vermouth, for example, we use Method Vermouth, which is a new brand out of New York, which is absolutely delicious.
Right.
So the beauty is that as the craft distilling scene has matured over the last 15 years or so in New York, you're seeing more products come out that are competitive with some of their sort of more traditional counterparts. So finding a great New York vermouth to use is key, and has always been a bit of an issue for craft distilleries that are trying to operate a decent cocktail program. So yes, we can use that. We have Amaros now coming out of New York, which are delicious.
I was just going to say
My boy Patrick Thatcher Bruto is doing great work.
And even the bitters like from St. Agreste's, like
Yes.
his Amaro. I mean well, he doesn't Amaro, but his Inferno,
Yeah.
which kind of straddles like
Right.
the Campari,
You get your
Aperol.
Exactly. So you get that vibe going on too.
So you have to use that kind of stuff.
Yes, exactly. But that's actually where that might have been a hindrance 10 years ago. Right now, it's great. It's great, and it forces you to be a little bit more creative with local ingredients. And
you know, that's my thing.
Yeah,
I love it. And you're already a premium brand, so it's not going to affect you in terms of like nobody's going to come here and be blown away because of the price, because everything you're doing deals in that like if you're making drinks with all those products, it's a little bit more expensive than if you were, you know, you had like Southern's portfolio and you could just extract.
Well, I mean, obviously we have accounts with Southern and Empire, but we only are extracting New York stuff from those accounts. That being said, you look at the price of Campari, it's $30 a bottle, whatever it might be from distribution. It's not cheap.
Right.
And so using an Inferno bitter or whatever does make
it's the same.
It's the same price.
But with like some of the vermouths and stuff like that.
Well, that's the thing. The method vermouth is from the distributors like $15 a bottle.
Right.
It's the same price as just a little bit more than Dolan.
Right.
But it's actually a better quality vermouth.
Right.
And it's less than Antica. So basically, it's the perfect solution.
Everything is.
Yeah. Well, what isn't, right? But it's actually a really good solution.
Right.
To have that vermouth is the final piece of the puzzle for building a New York cocktail.
Now we just need a New York tequila.
Well, yes. Some bright sparks.
And now we get to talk about the TTB.
Yeah. Okay. Here you go. Keep going back to this.
Just kidding. I have to keep you on your toes. So the goal will be to like have like a full-fledged cocktail menu.
Yeah.
Highlighting
Fort Hamilton spirits with tweaks from other New York brands. So we have a Sazerac that we offer when we're doing our private events currently, which is made with our New York single barrel rye, made with New York Applejack, which is apple brandy from Barking Irons.
Great stuff.
Little Peychaud's bitters, a little absinthe that the guys from Standard Wormwood make.
I was going to ask.
Delicious.
Yeah.
You know,
my buddy just brought me one of their Amaros, and I was just like,
it's good.
What is this? It's so crazy.
Yeah,
they're fun cocktails.
Yeah, they're pretty esoteric guys. They do nice work.
Yeah.
So you know, we basically recreated a Sazerac, but with New York ingredients, and it's absolutely delicious.
Banging.
Yeah, completely banging. So you can think that plus more. You know, and then obviously we've got these incredible products to work with already.
We will talk about in a minute.
Yes, we will. We'll get there. Yeah.
In just a minute. So come right back, and we'll wrap up with some products, information about the tasting room, and where you can get in touch with Alex or learn more about Fort Hamilton. We'll see you in just a minute, everybody. All right, everybody, we're wrapping it up today. We're again in Fort Hamilton Distillery in Industry City here in Brooklyn, New York, with my man, Alex Clark, the owner, old friends, old drinking buddies. Let's talk about product now. What do you have? I mean, you pointed out some really great things about how it's important to always have something out, but like rye has been hard to keep a steady. Even the best rye producers have struggled to keep their product on the shelf. So let's talk about your diverse portfolio and offering.
Diversity, yes. So our original product was the Fort Hamilton single barrel rye. Single barrel meaning it's we take one barrel at a time. We bottle that barrel individually, and then move on to the next barrel. So it's always unique. You're always going to get something slightly different with a different kind of twist on it each time you open one of these bottles, which is fun. And it's, you know, single barrel format is where some of the best whiskeys in the world are found. So that's why we wanted to do that and sort of lean into kind of diversity. And not for nothing, each batch that we do, I think we're up to batch 12 now, gets a little bit older too. So we are really excited now that we're around 4 years old on this guy. 90% New York State rye grain, 10% malted barley, also from New York State, and then aged in a 30-gallon barrel for around 4 years. Bottled at 90 proof, delicious. If you want an amazing Manhattan, you want an amazing old-fashioned, that will do it for you. So that was our original product. We then came out with at the end of 2019, we came out with a double barrel rye, which is our small batch offering. So single barrel meaning one barrel at a time, small batch meaning we probably make about 600, 700 bottles at a time, like 3 or 4 barrels, which I blend down together to create the double barrel style. Double barrel because I'm using 2 different barrels in there. We're using 90% rye, 10% malted barley in a 30-gallon barrel, and then we're using 95 rye, 5 malted barley in a 53-gallon barrel. Mashing that together to create a double barrel. And we do this at a very competitive price point. You're going to find this on the shelf just under $40 generally, around the $40 mark. Then, like we were talking about earlier, you know, the reaction to COVID was, oh my God, then, okay, what are we going to do about all this? And we have been laying down significant amounts of bourbon for a while in New York, but we haven't released any in a single barrel format yet, although you can expect to see that next year.
Okay.
But what we have done is release a double barrel bourbon. So this came out right at the end of 2020 as a, you know, screw you COVID situation. We wanted to get into the market with bourbon. Bourbon's the biggest selling whiskey in America. It outsells rye about 20 cases to 1 currently, but we're here to change that.
For sure.
And we are changing that. Rye's growing very steadily. It's booming.
Night and day compared to 15 years ago.
Yeah, right? I mean, it wouldn't move 15 years
15 years ago, you would have like 3 ryes on the shelf and like 25 bourbons.
And no one cared. No one cared about rye. And
now, like the one old crusty guy would come in and buy it.
Right. But now people are rediscovering the classic cocktails and rediscovering rye as this original whiskey style of America. And we're kind of leading the charge on that one. That being said, business is business. And if you're not in the bourbon game in America, you're not necessarily in the game.
In the whiskey game.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So we wanted to be in the whiskey game, but we wanted to, in the bourbon game, sorry, but we wanted to make a bourbon that kind of spoke to our roots as a rye whiskey focused company and as a New York company. So we made a high rye double barrel bourbon, which is super exciting because it's a bourbon that if you use it in a cocktail, actually has this rye backbone to it as well, which means it stands up to everything. So for those of you out there that might be rye curious, yeah, you can use that. You can have a bourbon, but you can have one with a higher rye content, which means that it really has presence in a cocktail more than your average bourbon. Right. Kentucky's done bourbon great, and they've also done some poor bourbon over the last 100 years or so. And we didn't want to add anything to that conversation. In Kentucky, like a high rye bourbon is considered about 18%. This guy right here is around 30, 32, 33%. That's a lot of rye. Yeah. And we've taken from the corn portion of the mash bill, added to the rye portion. So you get really quite an interesting hybrid style of bourbon, which has this unique rye content there.
And the rest is barley in that also, or are you doing some other grains?
Malted barley.
Yeah.
So there's malted barley in there too, which gives you a nice little cocoa finish. And yeah, it's a great bourbon. It's a wonderful, unique New York style. Bourbon with New York attitude. That's the way I like to think about it. Then we came out with the cask strength rye whiskey, which is, yes, that's where it's at. So when I dreamed up this crazy madcap scheme a few years ago, I wanted to recreate that essential style that was around 100 years ago. So
does
to
that
do
say
it,
56?
58.5. 58%. That's 117 proof. And we're barreling everything at 120. And over the years, this is 4.5 years old. Over that time in a barrel, proof can go up, proof can go down. You're always going to get less out than you put in, significantly less. But what happens is the flavors intensify as the angel share happens, and as the whiskey oxidizes slightly. So oxidizes. So we really happy with the way this is showing. I was tasting with Danny, the head distiller from Barton 1792 the other day. He was blown away. Nice. He couldn't believe that this came out of a 30-gallon barrel. So we're really showing people the potential of New York rye whiskey with this guy. And it's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is available from the website, forthamilton.com. And you know, you can check
F-O-R-T, right?
F-O-R-T.
I always fuck this up and I put F-T. And
that's just lazy.
I know.
Yeah. F-O-R-T Hamilton, yes. Then just last weekend, we brought out our first bourbon barrel-aged maple syrup.
Boom.
Boom. Who doesn't want that on their pancakes or in their old fashions? My God, we are doing barrel-aged maple old fashions now on the weekend down here at the tasting room, which is open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Check out our hours at forthamilton.com. You can book a tour. Come visit us. We do a beautiful tour. We talk about the history of whiskey in America, history of Industry City, the history of rye in general, how we make the whiskey. You can taste whiskey straight from the barrel. You can taste whiskey straight from the still. So unaged whiskey, full cask strength barrel whiskey.
Clear.
And then
that clear stuff.
Clear, that good stuff, just the way you like it. And then we also let you bottle your own bottle of whiskey, which you can then take with you at the end of the tour if you want. So yeah, forthamilton.com, you can book online there. But the barrel-aged maple syrup is fun because it also means that now I have barrels that once were emptied for bourbon, refilled for maple syrup. Then when they're emptied of maple syrup, I'm refilling them with rye whiskey. So we're going to have New York maple finished rye whiskey. And that's organic New York maple syrup.
So just real quick, because I
Yeah.
don't want to eat up too much time, but this
Go
is
for
like
it.
a legit like TTB question. How
Yeah.
does that repurposed barrel work? Because typically, like, just to label it rye, it has to be in brand new.
Right,
charred
but
American
if you've already qualified it as a rye because you've aged it for, like, in this case, 4 years in an American heavily charred brand new white oak barrel, it's a rye whiskey at that point.
Gotcha.
Then you have to submit a new label which says rye whiskey finished in a maple syrup cask or something along those lines. At that point, and then you have to submit a formula to the TTB showing what it is that you've mixed together. So basically, we put rye whiskey in this oak barrel, and which had formerly had maple syrup in it. So it becomes almost like a blend at that point, right? So
Yeah.
ultimately, they just want to know what ingredients we use to create this new style.
But that's the
you have to-
workaround is it has to be rye. You couldn't take brand new free run, throw it in the maple syrup barrel, and call it a
No,
rye whiskey.
that is
In
correct.
a maple barrel,
No.
that would not.
It could be called whiskey distilled from a rye mash or something like that,
Right.
but that is a much lower classification, which involves
And a lot more words.
Yes, it is.
You want to keep it streamlined.
Yeah, so no, we don't want to do that. We want to use the best ingredients we possibly can. So we make that rye totally complete, and then we're putting a spin on it. Most people would they're going to finish something with maple syrup. It means they would use an inferior product to do that. We don't want to do that. We want to swing for the fences. We want this to be the best damn maple finished rye whiskey you've ever tasted.
Boom!
That's the way we do it.
Nice. Address is 6834th Street, correct?
Yes.
In Brooklyn, Industry City. Check it out. FortHamilton.com, F-O-R-T.
Yes.
Social media
Fort.Hamilton.Distillery.
on Instagram, and you're on Facebook as well.
Instagram, Facebook,
and Twitter.
and we are on Twitter.
Yeah, I found you.
That's actually
You
ft.hamilton.
don't put shit up there, but I found you.
I don't.
I tagged you. I was
Yeah.
like, all right, at least it's there.
I didn't even know Twitter was still a thing.
Oh, Twitter's great. I love Twitter. So check it out, Fort Hamilton, distillery, all their different offerings online and everything. But, Alex got great advice too. I've watched this play out from day one and seen this brand grow. And it's always fun to see. I love the story. I love to hear the tale of catching the big fish. And yeah, he's got great insights. If you're interested in just like getting your thing off the ground too, come have a drink with him and chat with him.
Please do.
He's a wonderful fellow. I still think he's going to try to overthrow the country. Like this, just
I don't think you need any help with
nice
that.
Damn. And with that, we're out, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Thanks.